Nigeria Airways Flight 2120 was not a routine commercial flight with a dense schedule and a familiar fleet. It was a charter flight, arranged seasonally, carrying mostly passengers returning to Nigeria after a pilgrimage in Jeddah. On July 11, 1991, the DC-8 prepared to leave Saudi Arabia amidst a crowded airport, massive time pressure, and a mentality that everything had to run on schedule. On paper, the flight bore the name Nigeria Airways. But in reality, the entire flight operation was handled by NationAir Canada. From the aircraft and crew to maintenance, this was a model not uncommon at the time. A national carrier leasing capacity from outside to meet sudden demand spikes. The problem lay in the fact that when responsibility is fragmented, the boundary between whose is it and who is ultimately responsible becomes blurred. The DC-8 was put into service for a long journey from the Middle East to West Africa. A heavy flight, in hot weather conditions, with safety margins that were already narrow. There was nothing in the flight plan to suggest this was an unusual trip, but it is precisely that normal on-paper status that worries industry veterans. These types of charter flights often operate under hidden pressures. Pressure for punctuality, pressure on costs, and pressure not to delay the entire chain behind them. When schedules are tightened, small decisions are easily overlooked. No one standing on the runway that day thought they were looking at a classic case of how a seemingly logical chain of links could lead to severe consequences. Flight 2120 began like hundreds of other charter flights. No noise, no alarms. But in aviation, it is exactly the flights that look fine where risks most easily slip through. And this story begins right there. The old aircraft and the veneer of experience. Moving to this part of the story, we must look directly at the aircraft that performed Flight 2120. It was a Douglas DC-8-61, registration CG-MXQ, manufactured in 1968. By the early 1990s, this aircraft type was no longer a symbol of the new era. It belonged to a generation accustomed to working until the end, as long as it still met minimum standards. The DC-8 wasn't bad, nor obsolete on paper, but it demanded much higher operational discipline compared to more modern aircraft. The crux of the matter lay not in its age, but in how it was exploited. This DC-8 did not belong to Nigeria Airways. It was brought in by NationAir Canada under a lease contract, along with their crew and maintenance system. In that model, the aircraft does not have a fixed home. It flies by contract, runs during peak seasons, and is frequently pushed to operational limits to maximize efficiency. The crew on board were people with flight hours, with experience on the DC-8 and long-haul routes. They were not amateurs, but experience, in a charter environment, sometimes only helps people get by, rather than stopping to ask uncomfortable questions. When an old aircraft is handed to a team used to keeping everything running smoothly, the line between acceptable and worrying begins to blur. Ownership is not just a legal matter. It is a long-term responsibility. When an aircraft belongs to an airline, every sign of wear leaves a question mark. But with leased aircraft, each flight is like an independent shift. Finish this one, move to the next. Flight 2120 operated within that very structure, where everything still looked good enough until it was no longer enough. When pressure is ignored, after the old aircraft and the tangled charter model, the next link of Flight 2120 lay very low, right against the runway surface. It was the main landing gear tires, things that seem simple, yet bear the entire weight and speed of a heavy flight amidst the Middle Eastern heat. Before takeoff, a condition of underinflation, lack of pressure, in some tires had been detected. This was no secret, nor was it a hard-to-spot error. To technical personnel, it was a clear sign. If left alone, the tires would suffer friction greater than normal when accelerating, and the heat would rise very quickly. Standard procedure stated very clearly that it must be resolved thoroughly. But a procedure is only strong when there is someone willing to protect it. This flight did not stand alone on the tarmac. It was part of a chain of connecting flights with a stretched schedule. Every minute of delay would drag along a series of problems behind it. In that context, the decision to change the tires, which consumes time and causes delays, became an unpleasant choice. And as often seen in major accidents, no one made an obviously reckless decision. Instead, there was temporary acceptance with the belief that everything was still within limits. When the DC-8 began to accelerate, The underinflated tires were forced to work beyond their capacity. Friction increased, heat built up, and the rubber structure could no longer withstand it. What happened next was not a surprise to any ground engineer. The tire failed, heat spread to the surrounding area, and a small problem under the landing gear quickly spiraled out of control. In aviation, very few disasters start in the sky. Most originate on the ground, in decisions pushed to later. Flight 2120 is a prime example of how schedule pressure, when combined with complacency and an old aircraft, can turn a small technical detail into the starting point of an entire chain of incidents. The fire with NO Bell. When Flight 2120 left the ground, formally, the flight had passed the most dangerous moment. But that was precisely when the real problem began. Beneath the fuselage in the landing gear area, the heat accumulated from the overworked tires did not disappear. It continued to spread silently, like a covered coal fire, not flaring up immediately, but hot enough to slowly eat into the surrounding structure. The DC-8 was designed according to the standards of a different era. The fire warning system focused mainly on the engines and critical compartments, not in hidden corners like the wheel well. Therefore, the fire there did not trigger an alarm bell. No flashing lights, no clear message, "I in the cockpit." Everything still looked controllable, until the systems began to fall apart piece by piece. The first signs did not say directly that there was a fire. They appeared in the form of electrical failures, loss of signal, and then some subsystems stopped responding. For the crew, this was the most uncomfortable situation in the profession. There is a problem, but no map. No one told them where the fire was, how fast it was spreading, or what would go next. In this industry, fire is not most terrifying when it blazes bright. It is most dangerous when it travels in silence, cutting electrical wires, weakening the structure, and turning the aircraft into a slow-reacting machine. Every fragmented warning appearing in the cockpit at this moment was just a symptom, not the cause. Flight 2120 was flying with an invisible enemy right beneath the floor. As the crew tried to piece the information together, the fire was already several steps ahead of them. This was the moment a small technical incident, once ignored on the ground, officially crossed the line and became a situation that no written procedure could fully handle. The battle against time and a weakening machine. When the first warning flashed in the cockpit, the pilots quickly understood that this was no longer a simple malfunction. The silent fire beneath the floor had turned into an enemy that could not be ignored. Immediately, they sent a distress signal, and the only decision left was to turn back to Jeddah Airport, the nearest place that could receive the plane waiting to burn up bit by bit. But unlike other emergencies, Flight 2120 was not just facing an isolated problem. The fire spreading in the structure under the fuselage began destroying core support systems. Pressurization, the thing that maintains air pressure inside the cabin, began to lose control. Hydraulics, the source of power helping pilots control flight surfaces and landing gear, also gradually weakened. In a complex machine like the DC-8, when one link breaks, the entire response system is affected. With every passing minute, the ability to maintain the flight path became more fragile. The crew had to struggle to maintain stability while alarm screens flashed continuously. Tools that once helped them control the flight now became uncertain variables. There was no room for error, no time for prediction. In mid-air, the aircraft was gradually losing its ability to protect itself. The race against time and failing machinery began. A tense journey without gunfire, where every maneuver could be the final decision. Flight 2120 was not just flying. It was fighting not with the sky, but with its own frame and components inside. That is the harshest battle in aviation. Holding onto life on a vessel that is slowly having its nerves severed. The conclusion of a chain of mistakes. As Flight 2120 attempted an emergency landing after a series of technical failures and smoldering fire, the aircraft entered the final stage of the battle for survival. But the essential systems were too devastated. There was no longer enough strength to help the crew control the massive vessel in the sky. The aircraft gradually lost the ability to respond accurately, and the flight path became unstable. In the final tense minutes, it suddenly plummeted to the ground, less than 3 kilometers from the runway. The inevitable impact and violent explosion drowned out all hope of survival for the 261 people on board. The casualty figure is not just a statistic. It is a blunt warning to the entire aviation industry about how a chain of small errors, ignored or accepted under time and cost pressure, can combine to create a total disaster. From the delay in changing tires, the smoldering fire under the floor going undetected, to the degradation of critical control systems, each link contributed to destroying the aircraft from the inside. There were no miracles in the sky that day. Flight 2120 is the clearest proof that, in aviation, safety is something that must be protected by ironclad principles, not by leniency or temporary trade-offs. And when the plane fell, it didn't just fall to the ground. It shattered trust in weak links and decisions pushed to later. This is a costly lesson on how every detail, no matter how small, can decide the fate of hundreds of people in the air. A costly lesson and the price of negligence. The Flight 2120 disaster was not just a casualty count, but a profound warning milestone for the global aviation industry, especially for airlines using leased aircraft and operating seasonally. This was the deadliest accident involving the DC-8, an aircraft type that had a long history and was once considered a reliable tool for many years. The incident triggered a widespread investigation, where every piece from the ground to the cockpit was dissected thoroughly. The results emphasized an undeniable fact. Strict technical inspection and maintenance procedures are not things that can be taken lightly or skipped due to time pressure or economic benefits. NationAir Canada, the operator of this charter flight, faced serious reputational damage. It is an example showing that when responsibility is dispersed and there is a lack of synchronized supervision, safety becomes the first victim. Holes in the system, no matter how small, can create an irreversible domino effect. One weak link will pull the entire structure down. Flight 2120 is concrete proof that strict adherence to every step of the technical procedure, from checking tire pressure to fire warnings, is a prerequisite for protecting life. This story engraves an unforgettable lesson. In the flying industry, the acceptance of even the smallest risk, just because we can't be late, can lead to unrecoverable disasters. It is a reminder to all those behind the controls and those organizing.